In this episode of Soundwall, I had the pleasure of interviewing Andy Powers, President, CEO, and Chief Guitar Designer at Taylor Guitars. Andy recently created Powers Electric and has designed some brand new electric guitars that are both unique, creative, and a pleasure to get your hands on. We discussed tinkering in his father's garage, getting started by repairing instruments, Southern California culture and innovation, and of course, his beautiful Powers Electric guitars. Enjoy.
You're listening to Soundwall with Adam Schumann, presented by Danville Music, your local music store.
We're here with Andy Powers from Taylor Guitars. He just released an incredible electric guitar. We've been selling a ton of them at our store. And the question I asked all my guests right off the bat is, tell me about the time you first fell in love with music.
Okay. I'm not totally sure when I first loved music, because my parents are both like hobbyist musicians and they're big music appreciators. So there was always music playing. But I can tell you that very clearly the first live show I ever went to was the bluegrass musician Doc Watson was playing. He was touring around, came through where we lived up by the kind of north coastal San Diego County. There's an old theater called the La Paloma up there. And my parents thought, oh, my dad's a big bluegrass country western kind of fan. And so they got tickets for us to go see that. I was, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years old enough to remember, young enough to not really have a clue, you know? And so we went to this show and it was awesome. It was so cool. I mean, there's this guy, he's playing guitar way better than anybody I'd ever heard play guitar. He's telling these funny stories, singing songs. Like the whole thing was just absolutely amazing. Then afterward, you know, it's a pretty small theater. And so he's standing in front of the stage in the little aisleway there. And I had the little program or something. And I was going to try and get his autograph. I thought, okay, well, that's a thing that people do. And so I went up to him, you know, and I asked for his autograph. He started laughing. He goes, well, where are you, son? And he goes, you know, the thing is, I never learned to write because I can't see. And I'm just clueless kid, right? You know, so not at all sensitive. I wasn't really aware of that yet. And I didn't really say anything. And I'm thinking, like, you can't see, that's kind of different. Like, you know. And then he continues. He goes, but come over here. He rubs me on top of the head. He goes, maybe some of the guitar playing will rub off on you. You seem to like that. I thought, oh, this is so cool. This guy is awesome.
Up here, he's got the Midas touch, it looks like, right?
Yeah, well, I'd like to think so, but I don't know, man. He was so good. So good. But that was one of the first times that I saw a musician. I mean, you could call him an entertainer, but they were making a life out of music, telling stories through their songs, sometimes stories themselves. It felt like his music had so much joy in it. I just loved it. Right. And from then on, I was like, oh, guitars. That's kind of the thing. I started on piano. Actually, I started taking lessons on piano when I was probably around that age. But my parents had a guitar, and a lot of their friends were also, you know, hobbyist musicians or just recreational players. At our little house, they would have all these friends come over, and there were a lot of tradesmen. You know, some of them were fishermen, avid fishermen, and so they come, you know, bring fish in. They're cleaning their catch and all the stuff in the backyard, barbecuing. And they'd pass around guitars or a mandolin, a dobro, or whatever anybody had. And they'd sing songs, play songs, and just have a good time. And I thought, well, this is fun. This is what everybody does. You know, this is kind of what music is for. And so it felt to me at the time like guitars were instruments that you shared music with. Like you shared that music with your friends, with your family, with your neighbors, whoever. And piano felt a little more like an instrument that you study.
Gotcha. And it's clearly not as portable, right?
But it's clearly not as portable. I like playing piano. I like it a lot. But guitar became like, it felt like it had a much stronger appeal to me. I liked that it was made of wood. I liked the shape of it. I liked the songs that came out of it. And it represented to me like a really good time. You know, they were like really happy memories around that, or happy experiences that kind of centered around that shared music experience.
That is great. Do you remember your first guitar, what it was?
Yeah. The first one that I could lay claim to as being mine was like a secondhand Strat. It wasn't a great Strat, but it was mine. Mm-hmm. I really liked it. I got really into playing surf music, like Ventures, a lot of Dick Dale kind of stuff, Shantays, Safaris. I really liked that instrumental kind of early 60s kind of thing. Got into the Dwayne Eddy sort of sounds. And I liked learning those songs because you could hear the guitars really clearly and there were no words to get in the way. So it was like really fun guitar music to learn. So I got really into that.
Singers are always stepping on our stuff, aren't they?
You know, it's kind of like the classic joke. How do you know when there's a singer at your front door? They can't find the key and they don't know when to come in.
Oh, man. I'm surprised I haven't heard that one yet. That's great. So now this guitar, this first Strat you had, was this the first one you started tinkering with or working on, or?
Yeah, I worked on that a little bit. I'd actually tried building guitars before I got that one, though. Because
really?
we had an acoustic guitar, and my dad's a carpenter by trade.
Okay.
And so he would bring home scraps of wood from his jobs, from when he was working on stuff. And sometimes they were just, little bits and pieces. Sometimes it was like, oh, that's a nice chunk. I could do something with that. And so he'd make skateboards, make little models, make all kinds of stuff. And he brought home this piece. I think it was an offcut from a mantle that he was making for someone's fireplace. Anyway, I thought, oh, that one's big enough to build a guitar. That's going to be cool. I'm going to try making a guitar. And so I built a guitar, but it's not what I call a guitar now. It was a guitar-shaped object. It was a childish attempt at building a guitar. I didn't know the first thing about any of it. I knew that the front had to be thin. I knew that the back had to be thin. That was hard. That was a challenge, to be able to cut a piece of wide wood and have it be thin. I didn't really know how to bend sides. So I worked the thing until I got it together. I cut the heads off some nails and cut the points off nails, got those in as frets. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that fret wire was like a thing. So it was a childish attempt. And I begged a set of tuning keys. It wasn't a set, it was 6 mismatched tuning keys from one of the local music stores. I had to use a set of guitar strings, which is just disgusting if you think about it. And so I put this whole thing together, started to tune it up, and it just exploded into bits. I mean, it literally just pop, everything came apart.
A lot of tension on those strings, right?
Yeah, I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I was only 7 or 8 years old at the time. I was clueless. I didn't know that there was braces inside. I didn't know that there had to be like big blocks for where you attach the neck. The whole thing it looked like a guitar, but it literally just imploded when I tried to put strings on it. And so it was like this, kind of startling thing. I've never had that happen. I probably burst into tears, but I ran into the house, started looking real close at the guitar that we had in the front room. I went, okay, there's lots of other stuff inside. There's all these sticks. I can see those ones. I don't know how to look at the other parts, but just from what I can see through the hole, there's all this other stuff. Okay, those must make it stronger. So I'll try again. Tried again. That one broke almost as spectacularly as for the first. Tried that again. The third time it held together just long enough for me to like kind of play a song before it broke. Went, oh, okay. That's improvement, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, for 7 or 8 years old, Jesus.
Well,
that's pretty.
I was trying.
Yeah, it's great. So did your father know that you were attempting this?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he would come in and look and go, okay. But he'd also had enough kind of wisdom to say, just let him be. Let's see where it goes.
Yeah.
Probably nothing comes of it, you know. It's a different mindset than I think a lot of times people now, they see someone trying anything, go, ooh, that's like a thing.
Yeah.
Go, no, it's just the stuff that kids try, you know. You just let it play out the way it does. And so I got really into, not long after that, I got really into building ukuleles because it was easy to find a little piece of wood.
Right.
I liked playing those. That was kind of fun. A lot of the old surfer guys around, they all played ukes aside from guitars, and go, oh, it's really easy to find a little scrap of wood. So I got into building those. Started, and it kind of organically grew to go, oh, you're interested in guitars. You're trying to make this one. Oh, it's actually pretty good. Do you think you could fix this old guitar I got? I go, I will say yes, and then I'll figure out how.
Gotcha.
So I started working on, garage sale style guitars. Like, oh, I got this one for $5 at a garage sale. It's really broken. I might be able to put it back together. And so I taught myself how to fix guitars. And at the same time, you're watching the way that something comes apart or what you need to do to make it work. It teaches you a lot about how guitars were being made. And so over time, I ended up doing lots of repairs for all the local music shops, started building some custom instruments for people. It starts with, friends of my parents or a friend of a friend of a friend, or the guy who lives down the street who also likes, this kind of instrument or whatever. And so it just started to grow into this thing where I went, oh, well, this is just something that I do. I never really thought of it as a career or job or work. It was just something I liked.
You're unknowingly reverse engineering what you were
Exactly.
going to start building.
Yeah, because I was always playing music. I thought, well, this is fun. I like that part too. But I was also homeschooled as a kid. And so one of the things that I learned at a real young age was, you've got this work you need to do. You can make that take all day if you want, or you could buckle down, get it done, and then move on to the things that you want to work on. And so I had a lot of free time, in afternoons and all this to go, well, okay, surf's not fun for riding because it's windy, or my mom can't take us to the beach today or whatever. I'll work on this. I'm going to work on this guitar. I'm going to work on this ukulele. I'm going to try making this thing. And so you just chip away at something long enough. You go, this doesn't matter that I'm not earning any money. That doesn't matter because I'm a kid. I don't have a rent bill to pay. I don't have any needs in that way.
Yeah. You were fortunate enough to be able to be interested in these things before you had the major responsibilities, huh?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like that first 10 years where you're working on something and you don't earn a penny from it, but you're learning about it. I was fortunate that happened at a young enough age in life where it didn't matter.
Gotcha. And you also had the tools because your father was clearly into woodworking and some.
Yeah. So I'd start with his tools. I had learned how to use a lot of things. Go like, well, I don't have a this, I don't have a that, but I do have this. That's what I'll figure out how to use. And then go, oh, I earned a couple of bucks from doing that repair. I'm going to go buy a tool.
Yeah.
I'm going to buy something. I really would love to have, a plane like this, or I'd love to have a chisel like that, or some clamps, or, so I'd slowly start building this tool collection that would let the work kind of expand and grow from there.
That's amazing. So yeah, you had all the tools in place to start being a guitar builder.
Yeah.
Pretty much, right?
Yeah. And it's funny because I didn't even think of that as a profession. I didn't like the thought that people would do that for a living didn't really occur to me. I mean, it sounds silly now to go, well, of course, everything has to be made by someone. They have to exist somehow, but I never thought of guitar makers as being, that's like a profession that some people have. It might be a unusual profession, but that's a thing.
Gotcha. So I guess you started playing guitar. You were building them. Describe were you in bands when you were in your teenage years?
Yeah,
in your 20s?
all throughout that range. I was playing. I still to this day really like surf music. So I had a surf band, played kind of that sort of thing. We'd show up at surf contests and other events, and we get hired to play that kind of thing. I got really into jazz. I got really into playing that kind of anything from like early Django Reinhardt style gypsy jazz, a lot of Wes Montgomery. Got really into Charlie Christian, kind of like those sort of early guitar jazz oriented players, and then it turned into everybody else.
Well, I interrupted you before the podcast, and I tell my guests a lot of times, like, we got to stop this because this is going to be good. This is going to be good for the podcast, and you're going to go through it. But you and I have a similarity in that we both played in jazz groups, and I think a lot of them. I mean, guitar players are a dogmatic bunch anyway,
right?
But the jazz players are the dogmatic of the dogmatic. And apparently, you had a story about apparently you have an issue with your squeaky chairs. Would you like to tell our guests?
Well, okay. So that was a little bit. That came a little later in life. I finished high school at a young age, but I ended up studying at UCSD. Really cool music program, and I went, okay, well. I had a scholarship to study, so I don't want to waste it. I was the sort of person who I really can't say that I was a good student because I didn't study really hard for most things, but I got good grades. So they're like, hey, if you want to come to do some music here, that would be cool. I go, okay, that's great. And I knew a bunch of the professors down there because I'd already either played in bands with them or had worked on their instruments.
Right.
And so I was already familiar with a lot of the folks who were teaching there. And it was a great experience because it really stretches you, right? But there were these what they call juried performances where you'd sit down in front of like a panel of judges. They're real experienced musicians, some on guitar, some on different instruments. You'd play this complicated thing that you'd worked on for weeks and months. And then they sort of tear you apart.
Yeah.
And it's a very humbling experience, but I would tend to move. Like if it was a piece of music that I liked, I would tend to sway, I would move, I'd start rocking, I might tap a foot, like all the things that like a trained musician probably should not do. And so one time in particular, I had worked on this arrangement of a Chopin piece. I was kind of proud of it, and it sounded really cool, but I loved the piece. And this guy, he was doing his job, so I don't want to think badly of him. He ripped me apart. Just absolutely tore me to pieces because I turned the pages too loudly, and it was distracting. And the chair that I was sitting on squeaked all over the place. He's like, every time you move, I can hear this thing squeak. It ruined the whole thing. And I'm like, oh, it never even occurred to me. I guess I was
chewing bubblegum too?
Probably. So to this day I go like, ooh, in a studio environment, be careful with squeaky chairs, they'll come back to haunt you.
Right.
You ruin a really good take.
That's funny. So you're in the music scene. You're playing in bands. You went to school, and for music. And was engineering in any part of your curriculum, or is it just something you were doing?
Well,
in a garage.
Not formally.
Yeah,
not formally, but yes, it was part of what I, speaking more broadly about the education. Mm-hmm. I think that especially when kids are young, the more kinds of things that they're exposed to, the better. And so like where I grew up, there happened to be a couple of engineers who lived on the same street. Most of them were retired. One of them was really into Model A's, early Fords. Mm-hmm. So he was always working on all these cool cars. The guy who lived next door to him was a retired electrical engineer, learned a ton of stuff from, old books that he would give me, little bits and pieces. He's like, oh, you're working on that. Try this. You need a set of pillow blocks and a couple of bearings for that shaft, and it'll, whatever it might be. And so I would take these things that a lot of times older guys knew about. They were the fun people to hang out with because they knew all kinds of cool stuff. And then I would take those things that I'd learned and I'd start applying them to guitars. So like, as an example, there was a fellow who had a speed shop. He would build motors of all kinds, but really loved building drag racing motors. An older Hawaiian guy, his shop was close enough I could ride my bike there. My fretwork got really good when I started hanging out with him because he taught me how to read scratch patterns. So for the old school guys who used to build engines by hand, they were obsessive about looking at the scratch pattern on a surface and using lapping plates, like a real flat surface and some abrasive to create a pattern. And when all the scratches were perfectly uniform, you knew that surface was perfectly flat the way that your reference plate was. And so he was teaching me about that on engines. And I went, oh, this is the same thing that I need to do when I crown frets. I got to work this scratch pattern in and then reshape my frets. And that's kind of what taught me how to do really good fret jobs.
Gotcha. And were you mostly working on nickel or stainless steel or both?
Stainless, for frets, stainless wasn't a thing back then.
Okay.
So I'd occasionally see brass frets on old guitars, but typical kinds of fret wire. But you take that same idea and go, well, even if it's on a piece of wood, I can use the same idea, the same concept. If it's preparing a finish, same kind of thing. You work a finish down to where it's got a totally uniform scratch pattern, then you work your way up through grits and into polishing compounds. You've got a perfect gloss finish. So there's all kinds of things where you go, I can take machining tricks, engineering tips, learn about electrical engineering or whatever it is. I might not have a degree in it, but it doesn't mean that you can't learn about it. Yeah. Because a lot of these things have applications outside of the narrowly defined field that you might study.
Right. I tell my kids this too, is don't confuse education with school.
Yeah. That's a really succinct way to say it.
Yeah. And clearly you got your schooling through music, but the education you got and the amount of things that were available to you, it sounds like you took everything and you ran with it, and which is
it's fun.
Yeah.
If it's something that catches your imagination, it never feels like work. It's something that feels exciting. It's like I got really into hot rods because I liked them. And there's, all these guys around, everybody, and almost everyone's garage there or on the side of their house, there's a toy car of some kind or a project or things. That's a lot of what Southern California feels like. And so they were always working on this. I go, oh, this is actually pretty cool.
It really reminds me of an article I read about Fender. I read this, the start of Fender guitars, because they were just saying Leo was right next to a shop that was building airplanes, smaller airplanes.
Sure.
And everybody was talking to each other. It's what is it about Southern California that's got that sort of breeding ground for that sort of interest and culture? You're very ingrained in a best way possible in Southern California culture. What do you think it is? I've
wanted to define it because I didn't recognize it until I traveled other places. And then, when you're someplace else, you go, actually, my hometown is, well, for one, it's different than here. So what exactly is it that's different? I'm not totally sure, but I think there was the confluence of a few different influences. One is that it feels like the Wild West still. It's like if Manifest Destiny were still a thing. The result of it is all the freaks and the weirdos and the strange tinkerers, they kept getting pushed further and further west. It's like, go out on the westward, frontier and, you guys go stay over there where it's less civilized. Yeah. Finally, we ran into the Pacific Ocean and we stayed here.
And you had nowhere to go.
Yeah. So maybe there's some of that. But I think in post-World War II especially, there was this mix of industrial know-how, a freedom of design. There was no one who was going to say no. You weren't going to be told, oh, you can't do it that way. That's not how it's been done, because you're pretty far removed from a lot of the other things that have been developed. And so I think those kinds of things sort of impacted it. I mean, if you were to look at, take a comparison even to the other kinds of woodworking that have been done. Look at furniture. Okay, let's say take a chair. Imagine a chair designed by Ray and Charles Eames. Okay, so you think of the classic bent plywood, an Eames chair. Okay, well, that's a very, very different kind of thing than the sort of furniture that would have been built in Grand Rapids, Michigan in the early 1900s. Okay, that was a giant furniture area because that's where there were woods that could be made into furniture. Compare that to the kinds of furniture that would have been made in Pennsylvania, in, Amish country. Very different styles, different approach. They represent different kinds of lineage of design as well as craft. They're all cool. They're just very different. And so I think in California, there was a little more of that freedom that would allow you to explore an idea that hadn't been tried. Maybe try it in a new way, create some new lines, and then put that against the backdrop of really nice weather. If you go outside here, the weather's not trying to kill you. So you can try a lot of different things that you might not try in a place that is so heavily regulated by seasons, or, this is the time you prepare, this is the time you harvest, this is the time of the year that you just try to survive. It's a little different than that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Weather might have a huge part to do with it.
I think that's actually, a lot of it comes down to as simple as that. They'll go, we work on old cars here because they're still around. They didn't rust away. They didn't disappear. They're easy to take care of. They're still here.
Wow. Yeah. That's an angle I never really thought of. And it also sounds like you're a student of just any sort of woodworking. Like you went to seek that education out yourself too. So how does one do that? Is it just natural curiosity of seeing design and?
Yeah. A lot of it would be, I like woodworking. I want to know how things are done. I want to try something, go, okay, well, there's this whole traditional craft. There's like a Japanese lineage to woodworking. There's an English kind of lineage towards woodworking. There's the backgrounds of furniture design. How would people make what they made with the materials that were available to them? Why would they make them in that way? Like, what need were they trying to fill? Right? How did people live in a way that the things they made would support that? It's kind of like cooking. If you go around the world, you think, well, why are different cuisines the way they are? Go, well, these are the ingredients that grow here. This is the taste. This is what we have. So this is how it developed based on patterns of a year, patterns of growth and harvest, it's all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
They're fun to know about.
At what point did you start getting noticed by companies like Taylor? Did they approach you, or were you kind of seeking them out?
No, I started meeting some guitar makers. Sometimes it would be through something like a NAMM show, or if they would do an event in town. There were a lot of musicians around. San Diego actually has a pretty vibrant music community. And so there would be, things, and, it's a pretty small world. In some fields, there might be dozens of people that that you can talk shop with. In the guitar making world, it's pretty few. It's a smaller group. And so I had met other builders, smaller builders, a few people who worked for bigger companies. And I'd try to learn what I could from them, or at least listen to how they saw or approached their craft of instrument building. So I didn't really seek that out, but musicians continued to come to me, and sometimes I wonder why, but they would come to me, they'd ask for an instrument, and I go, okay, well, I'll get there. Yeah. And so by the time I finished, I didn't really even think of it as a job still by the time I finished college. So, I had this realization one day. I was actually out surfing. I go, oh man, all my friends are going to go get jobs. Some of them are going on tour. Some of them are going to get teaching jobs. What the heck am I going to do? I can't quit what I'm doing because, I mean, I've taken deposits on all these instruments that I promised that I would build people. So I have to fill those orders. So I can't quit even if I wanted to. But all my bills are paid. I absolutely love what I'm doing. I guess I'll just keep doing this and see what happens. And it worked out. We were really fortunate. It was like this kind of thing that just sort of organically happened to go, wait a minute, according to the IRS, I've already been in business for 10 years. I just keep going. I'll just keep making instruments. And at the time, I mean, it seems laughable now, but I was 2 or 3 years behind on orders that I had to fill. Went, oh, well, I guess I won't worry about it for the next couple of years. We'll just see where it goes. And sure enough, the telephone kept ringing and people would want an instrument. And I was happy to make it for them.
Cool. So now would be a good time to do a break.
All right.
We'll come back to it. I'm going to get some coffee.
Good call.
And we'll talk about you joining up with Bob Taylor.
Sure.
Sound good?
Sounds good.
Musicians, we are Danville Music, your local source for the best selection of high-quality musical instruments and accessories. Open 7 days a week right here at Danville Music, danvillemusic.com, your local music store.
All right. Well, we're back, and we're gonna talk about you becoming part of Taylor Guitars. So, how did that come to be?
Well, I'd met Bob when I was maybe in my mid-teenage years. We were sitting next to each other at a concert. A fellow named Harvey Reed was playing. He's kind of a troubadour, singer-songwriter guy, good musician, cool storyteller. Anyway, we're sitting next to each other, and I'd brought a ukulele that I'd built to show Harvey, and Bob, took that and was looking it all over. He goes, "Man, this is really cool. You ever want a job, look me up." I go, "Well, thanks. I'm not old enough to have a job, but I appreciate that, and I, just having fun doing what I do." And coincidentally, I was playing with another friend who lives here in town named Jason Mraz, singer, really good singer, actually, kind of pop, all kinds of interesting things. But we were doing a lot of duet, kind of like a 2-guitar thing, and using his incredible voice. And we were surfing together quite a bit then. And so anyway, we ended up playing together at a NAMM show at the time. Taylor would set up like a stage and in the afternoon have performances. So we played together. That was a lot of fun. And Bob and I got to talking afterwards. And he goes, "Oh, that's right. You're the guy building archtop guitars." Because I'd gotten really into making acoustic archtop guitars. I go, yeah. And so he set up just a time to hang out with another guitar making friend, Pepe Romero Jr. And so we got together to just have lunch and we thought, okay, everybody bring a guitar you made. So Pepe brought one of his incredible classical guitars. I brought one of my archtop guitars. Bob brought a flat top guitar that he had built or that Taylor had produced. And so we, had a fun afternoon, just kind of talking shop. And then I don't know if it was weeks or months later, I get this call out of the blue. Bob goes, "Hey, I want you to come down to the shop. I want you to come alone." And I'm like, okay.
Is this a drug deal? Or
It was like, and the whole time I'm thinking like, I don't know what he wants. I mean, it felt like I upset you over something. I mean, I was doing a lot of work for other artists who, were Taylor players, and I'd modify guitars or fix their guitars. And so I thought, I don't know if I did something to upset him or what, but it sounds intimidating and scary. So I came down to the shop, and he lays out this whole idea to go, "Look, we've started a company, Kurt and I. We've grown it to be what it is. And we don't want it to turn into something that's just a nameless, faceless, soulless corporation producing widgets." And so, he had some nice things to say about my work, and then said, "Well, what I want to do is have you come in and be the guitar maker, as well as take this company into the next generation so that it doesn't turn into what we don't want it to turn into. Which was, that's like a total left turn from what I was doing, because at the time I'd met my wife, we were married, and I was really thrilled with what I was doing. It was a very enjoyable existence because I was building instruments kind of like Geppetto, one at a time in a workshop. Yeah. And I loved it. And we were fortunate because it was working great. I went, well, and Bob was pretty open-handed with it. He goes, well, take 2 weeks to decide, or take 2 years. I don't care. He's like, it's you or nobody else. So think about it.
What a compliment.
Yeah, he was very, very open-handed, very, very kind about it. And I went, well, gosh, I don't know, but I don't see a way to keep going forward that direction, because this other track is kind of what sort of has played out. And then so we talked about it for several months, and he finally put it this way. He goes, well, look, in life, you're given a few things that you can be good at. You're kind of blessed with a gift that you can use. And so you got to decide, how can you best use that? Who can benefit from it? It was working the way you're working. You provide for your wife and your family. You can provide a really neat instrument for 12 or 2 musicians every year. And indirectly, their audiences. Goes, that's a noble existence. That's fine. That's great. It's clearly something you love. It's clearly working well for you. You could do that. Or you could take the things that you're naturally gifted at, and you could put them into this context that we call Taylor. You could provide for our 1,000 employees and their families whose livelihoods depend on producing these designs. You could provide for thousands of suppliers and vendors around the world whose livelihoods depend on supplying materials for those designs. You could provide for thousands of people around the world whose livelihoods depend on selling these things before you ever even got to the hundreds of thousands of musicians that get to enjoy playing these things that we make. And
did he end it with no pressure?
Yeah, kind of. Wow. He goes, so think about the way that you could best use your God-given talent. I went, well, if you put it that way, okay. Okay, let's give this a try. Yeah. Let's give it a shot.
And again, what a compliment. That's you must have been elated that he thought that highly of you, and to think that you could be responsible for all the things he was talking about.
Yeah, it was kind of intimidating in a lot of ways to go, this is not what I had in mind. This is not what I had in mind for life. This is not what I saw coming. I thought you were going to push me into the wood chipper, but here we are. Now what do I do? I guess it's my move. So, I guess I need to think about this a minute.
You've clearly had the birth to create some really cool designs in bracing and in electric guitars.
Yeah.
So
it's been fun.
Let's start with the bracing that you started.
Okay. Well,
which was amazing. And
so the first one, actually, there was kind of a run-up. I think a lot more players know about like the V-class idea and where maybe even some of the origins of that. But prior to that, when I first came here to Taylor and got a taste for how guitars were built or were being built, that was a real eye-opener. The scale of this is absolutely tremendous. Because I was going from the smallest shop, one of the smallest shops in the world, to one of the largest. The pace that the work had to be done at, the scale and scope of how a design would have to get applied. Like, I was living in the world where you would take a top and go, okay, you play, I watched how you play like this, you want a guitar that sounds like this, you want that. I'm going to build this guitar so that it perfectly matches what you want to do with it. It'll make the sound you want to make. It'll be fit to your physical size, your hands, your posture. Like, this is going to be a perfect instrument for you and what you're trying to do. Turned out that was actually kind of easy. A person can learn to do that. But then imagine trying to design an instrument to go, this design has to work for 1,000 different tops that come in, and every single one of them has to be good. And they run the gamut from kind of, let's say if it's spruce top, it's kind of soft and spongy, or ultra hard and dense. The design always has to sound good no matter which of those pieces of wood I'm going to work with. Okay, well, that's a different challenge altogether.
I don't think enough people pay attention to that, because you're not working with metallurgy. That's
right.
By and large very, very consistent. You're working with something that has a DNA.
It does.
Some of the trees were near a creek. Some of them were like out in the open. Some got more sun. But trying to make a one size fits all situation, that's got to be incredibly daunting.
Yeah, it was interesting and a huge challenge to say, okay, well, I don't get to individually voice this top. I need to voice it so that it always works. Okay, well, that it forces you into some different design decisions. And so there were like some of the initial guitars that I designed, I build one and then realize this can't be scaled in the same way. Okay. And so we came out with, there was a few different guitars that I really pushed a lot of cool guitar making tricks that was really tough on the factory. And I could see, this factory is going to rise to the challenge. This is pretty cool to see it scale. This is hard, but there's a willingness to do it and build a great instrument. Okay, cool, game on. Let's keep moving. So you try kind of just keep pushing at what you could do. Let's see if we can make the finish thinner. Let's see how accurately we can get these tops sanded to thickness. Can we create different grades or different sorts into different stiffness ranges? All kinds of cool things. And then along came this point where I went, for the way that we're building a guitar, the neck design that we're working with, the shapes that we're working with, I'm not going to be able to wring a lot more out of kind of these more conventional bracing form. Mm-hmm. There's not much more headroom past this. Okay, that's an interesting note. Let me try something. I don't know what to do next, but it's not going to be this. So I know that much.
Describe to me, or not to me, to any of the listeners, what is it about the vibrations of the V brace? What is it doing differently than the traditional bracing for guitars? Okay,
so the V-class idea, it's borrowing from some of the other instrument making traditions that I liked. There's certainly overlap into the world of archtop guitars. There's definitely a pretty healthy dose of classical guitar making in there. There's a little bit from even some Weissenburn design kind of things. And so having some background in those, it was a different context that sort of sparked the initial idea. And then I realized this is actually borrowing more from classical guitar making tradition, from archtop guitars, from all these other things. I can use this design, and it's a more direct, controllable kind of platform. So you end up with, I didn't think about it initially, but halfway through building the first guitar, I went, oh, okay, I'm an idiot. I should have known this all along. I'll get way better pitch accuracy. I mean, people tend to call it intonation in the guitar world, but that actually is more than just the stretching effect of strings. It's how accurately is this body reflecting the pitches that a string is feeding into it? Like, how accurately does it resonate? Okay. Well, if it doesn't shift it or change it, you'll end up with a more accurate result. You'll end up with more accurate pitch. You can create a longer sustain. You can control that a little better. You can control the voicing, like how warm do you want it to be? How bright do you want it to be? How uniform over the whole register do you want it to be? Because you have a little more direct control parallel to the strings as well as direct perpendicular to the strings. Mm-hmm. So it's not so much a blend between those two where, a change in this part necessitates a change in that, and that might not be a desirable change.
Okay, well, they say when you're designing something, a lot of times you're trying to solve a problem or fix a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for the consumer. So,
Very much.
So let's dive into Powers Electric.
Okay.
So what's your problem? what were some of the initial problems you were thinking? What were some of the problems you were thinking about?
If I could figure that out, I'd probably be a healthier person. That actually was more like play. That was a thing that was less of a problem to solve. I mean, you could break it down on a kind of a more microscopic level and go, yeah, there's a series of problems, if we want to label them that, like engineering problems that I wanted to change. But it really came from kind of more just a curiosity and something that seemed like it would be fun. Because having played a lot of electric guitars and grown up with them, I've owned a lot of different electric guitars. I've played on a lot of electric guitars. I've worked on a lot. I've worked on all kinds of guitars from all kinds of different eras by a lot of different makers. Mm-hmm. And there were things to appreciate about them. Go, oh, this one does this one does that. And you can see that they're not immortal. They're not untouchable. They were the product of some other person's ideas. Now, some of those had really cool ideas, and some of them missed the mark a little bit here and there.
Well, I remember when you had us from Danville Music coming down here, one of the demonstrations you did that made a really big impression on me was dropping the magnet down an aluminum tube. Talking about ferrous metals and non-ferrous metals. And so pretend like you never showed that to me. I want you to describe that to the audience, because you had these very powerful magnets and you'd shoot it through an aluminum tube and you'd say, well, they say there's no magnetic properties of aluminum, but that's not exactly true.
Yeah. So that was one element. It started more with just curiosity. I didn't realize that would later turn into a guitar pickup design. It was just, this is a really cool thing to know about and play with. Okay, so the property there's different forms of magnetism. Okay, people are most commonly familiar with ferromagnetism. Okay, it's if the thing, you think of it as like your classic refrigerator magnet. If there's some iron in the metal and you to have a magnet, it's going to stick, right? That's what we think of as magnetism. But other metals, I mean, copper, beryllium, copper, aluminum, tin, some forms of brass, things like that, when they're in the presence of a magnetic field, they exhibit some other kinds of magnetic properties. So they'll become, say, momentarily polarized. That effect can be very, very useful. So like the brake system on a roller coaster is typically built that way. Let's say if there's a power outage and you're on a roller coaster, you still really want the car to stop at the end of the track. You're probably not going to do it with levers and springs because that, might break people's necks and things like that. So you end up with these other kinds of mechanisms to go, well, if I build a big magnet and this aluminum piece over here, it'll stop the car. It'll act like a brake system. Because what'll happen is when you have this magnetic field, you can use it to induce an electric current that has opposite polarity and that use the two forces to kind of repel each other or control and shape a magnetic field. And so I ended up taking that idea and creating a design for a guitar pickup, kind of playing with that effect. Go, well, I can use it as a Faraday cage to make, say, a single coil run really quiet and not be so susceptible to outside radio interference. That's cool. But I could also use the aluminum casing of a pickup to help control the magnetic field, to either diffuse it or shape it in a beneficial way so that a string responds a little more naturally in front of it. So I played with that pickup design, not really knowing what to do with it or where it would eventually land for a number of years. It's like, this thing sounds, just by itself, it's a cool sounding electronic component. I'm just going to put it away on my shelf. Just leave it up there. Maybe I'll do something with it someday. I knew I had that, but somewhere along the lines, especially during COVID, that was a time where a lot of people had their someday projects.
Yeah.
If there was a day in the week that was called someday, it arrived.
Yeah.
And so I had played with a couple of different electric guitar designs, went, I'm not sure that any of this is like really a Taylor thing. Because Taylor, it has its own design language, the curves, the look, the feel, the kind of the stuff that a designer would say, those are Taylor shapes, Taylor materials, Taylor things. That's kind of a known thing. And so an electric guitar would be outside of that. It's its own kind of design language. So, I don't know what to call it, but we'll worry about that later. I'm just going to build a cool guitar. I wanted to build the kind of electric guitar that I wanted to exist back when I was 12, 13, 14 years old. Mm-hmm. It's like it's like nothing I've ever quite owned or had or played. I don't want it to be weird, but I want it to be unique in these other kinds of ways. And so I went through this process where I thought, if I were alive back when electric guitars were first being developed, largely I see that as a Southern California evolution, as like Paul Bigsby, Leo Fender, George Fullerton, Les Paul was here for quite a while, like Beauchamp, all those guys, Doc Hoffman. If I lived there, what would I have made? Okay, so there's no parts catalogs to buy stuff from. So you're going to make everything. You don't really know what a tune-o-matic is. You don't, because that doesn't exist yet. You don't know what a Fender single coil is like because that doesn't really exist yet. A lot of those things go, well, gosh, how would I have interpreted what musicians were asking for? Because that's kind of what, as a player, what I'm asking for.
That's got to be some incredible mental gymnastics to just make that separation. Like I have to forget everything and just completely start from new.
It is a trick to go, because if you're going to draw a new shape, I promise the first thing that your pencil wants to find is a shape that you already know. Yeah. Right? It's why a lot of musicians, when they want to write a new song, they pick up an instrument they're not comfortable with.
Do you feel like going surfing? Is there something about doing that kind of uses a big eraser so you can start new? Yeah, absolutely. That's one of my other kind of bizarre hobbies. I got really into growing fruit trees, so I like kind of the backyard orchard culture sort of thing. So I learned a lot of stuff from going surfing, from being in the water, from being in the ocean, from going and pruning trees, or even pulling weeds, whatever it is. There's places to let your mind wander. Yeah. And think about those kinds of things to go, okay, well, if I was going to design an electric guitar, how would I really want it to work? What kind of sound would I want to make with it? And so that's what ultimately led to the guitar we call the A-type. I drew a shape that I really liked, went, I love the look of these curves from every angle. It's a different style of body construction where it's totally hollow, but I don't want it to behave like a hollow body, almost like an archtop descent guitar. Mm-hmm. And that's not really it either, because I don't want it to feed back like that. I don't want the sound hole. I don't want the Helmholtz effect of that, open air chamber quite so strongly. I want it to be small enough to be comfortable to hold. I want the neck to work a certain way. I want the neck and the body to be joined a certain way. So I started redesigning all of the pieces, like literally from the tip of the headstock all the way to the strap button. This is going to work in a different way. The way that fretboard is glued to the neck and to the peghead veneer is a different kind of thing where the nut doesn't pierce through it. There's like a zillion and two little details in this. My favorite detail, and this is super nerdy, the camtail.
Yeah.
I mean, that, and for listeners who don't know what that is, it's one of those just stupid, simple ideas that when you hear about it, you're like, it should have been this way the whole time. Doing a different radius for every strings, it was one of those just very simple ideas where I'm like, well, yeah, you want to do a dip with a whammy bar, and it goes out of tune harmoniously.
Right.
That's amazing. I love that.
Well, so that was a very specific thing that I wanted to achieve, because I like playing pedal steel. Mm-hmm. I like playing dobro, some lap steel. I like those kinds of instruments. And when I can play an instrument like that, you've got this harmonic based approach to playing a form of guitar. And you can move this movable fret. That's how I think of a bar, is just a movable fret. And I can move it around and maintain relative pitch between strings. That's what makes those instruments sound so cool. At least that's the part that appeals to me. I go, I would love to have that ability on an electric guitar. Now, I know there have been some other designers who have tried to get there, and some of them fairly successfully. They achieved the goal, but I didn't like the way that the approaches that had been taken, because my experience had been that in order to account for all the variables that are required for the uniform elongation of strings, the hardware would become so complicated that they were very prone to maladjustment, or I wouldn't like the sound of them. Go, well, you get the effect, but I don't like the tone of the guitar anymore. I lost the part that I liked.
Yeah, there's certain things that you engineer for guitar that mechanically works beautifully,
right?
But then it just sucks the tone out of it. And it's like, damn.
I was like, well, I got there, but I don't like here.
Yeah.
Careful what you wish for,
Right.
And so this approach, I went, okay, well, if I don't aim for 100% perfect, because I can't achieve 100% perfect, but if I could get 90% good, if I could maintain relative pitch between strings kind of within the target range, say at concert pitch for a pretty typical set of guitar strings, that would be good enough. And I could do that accurately enough and simply enough that the tone that I get from the guitar itself sounds really good. Okay, that's pretty simple.
Yeah.
I can work towards that. So I came up with a couple of different ways to try it, going, well, I want a fairly familiar form of vibrato, but I want to be able to use that with fewer moving pieces and have it do it accurately. I want a bridge unit that's separate, but I want that to have like no moving pieces, because I want it to be coupled very, very well into the body so that I get a cool tone out of every note that I play. And so I was really happy with the way that worked out.
Yeah. Well, it's a fantastic guitar.
Thank you.
And man, I can't thank you enough for spending your time with us with the podcast. But before we go,
all right, 2
more questions.
Fair.
So 2 top 3 questions. I'd like to ask you first about 3 of your instruments that you would take with you into the heavens or wherever you're going after you die. And then the next question would be, what are 3 personality traits that you have or habits that have gotten you where you are today?
Okay, well, 3 instruments. I would need an acoustic guitar, because whether there's electricity or not, I want to go play some music. I love guitars in all their forms, but acoustic guitar, it's going to go with you anywhere. So I would take an acoustic guitar. Past that, I mean, maybe a ukulele, a smaller one, because that's a fun thing to hand to a friend and go, hey, we can play a song. It's a fun thing to hand to one of my kids and go, hey, let's play a song. Beyond those first 2, it's really nice to hear people use their voices. So I would take that, because one of the things that I love, maybe even more than guitars, I love the people who play them. I love that a person could take it upon themselves, say, I want to make a song. I want to tell you a story. I want to sing a song. I go, well, I want to listen. And so I would look at that and go, I would want to take a voice.
Great.
So 3 personality traits. Oh gosh, that's, I might not be the best person to answer that. I am curious. I have a lot of curiosity, because when I see something that catches my imagination, I would like to know more about that. And so I've made a habit of pursuing that. I've also made a habit of stopping, going, okay, so now that I'm curious about this, what beneficial thing can come of it? Because there's plenty of things I could be interested in, but they might not all have some sort of beneficial outcome. Go, okay, well, I want to be curious about this, and now I want to share it with other people. So I'm curious about it, and then I want to be able to share that curiosity.
Perhaps utility then?
Yeah, the utility of it. Maybe the last one that I would add in that list is that I feel like profound wonderment about all kinds of things that I could see around me. Like it's absolutely inspiring to go out on a beautiful sunny morning, look at the sky and go, wow, this is absolutely mind-blowingly incredible in its complexity. Like early this morning, I got to go surfing. The swell had come up. It blows my mind that wind could blow across water, create a little bit of ruffle in texture, and that texture through friction could turn into the Coriolis effect, where those waves start to amplify on each other, join together through sympathetic resonance or constructive wave interference, to use the oceanographer's term, that could then travel as a piece of energy moving through a huge body of water to get to a place where it would be shallow enough to start shoaling, where I might be able to ride on the energy that was created by wind 3,000 miles away. Like that blows my mind. And so it feels absolutely incredible that anywhere you could look, whether it was a fruit tree, whether it was a weather pattern, whether it was a beautiful ocean or an incredible forest growing, to see that and go, there is unbelievable complexity and brilliance all around us. I just absolutely love that.
Man, well put. Well, again, thank you so much for being part of this, and it's been a pleasure to talk to you, Andy.
Thanks.
Musicians, we are Danville Music, your local source for the best selection of high-quality musical instruments and accessories. Open 7 days a week right here at Danville Music, danvillemusic.com, your local music store.